Well, welcome fellow Rotarians and guests. We are broadcasting from, and you are joining us from many different locations today. So if you do have any difficulties, rest assured, you'll be able to view a recording of this meeting that will be loaded up onto our club website and onto YouTube in the coming days. Now, my name's Glenn Stafford and I'm your MC for today's Rotary Club of Sydney meeting. And today we're very pleased to welcome as our guest speaker, Juliana Nkrumah. I hope I've pronounced your surname right. As our guest speaker, and the subject of Juliana's talk will be agitating around Black Lives Matter in Australia. Now, any questions you have for Juliana may be submitted via the chat function throughout the talk. And please note that all chat comments are viewable by the meeting host. Now, to celebrate 100 years of Rotary in Australia and New Zealand, we have teamed up with UNICEF to give life-saving vaccines to 100,000 children across the Pacific. This centenary project, Give Every Child a Future, urgently needs your support and your donations. We aim to vaccinate 100,000 children in 9 Pacific Island countries against 3 diseases. $45 will vaccinate a child for life, $4.50 will vaccinate 10 children for life. Now, I'm putting up the link to how you can make donations up on chat. So if you do want to make a donation, just follow that link. And whilst we're on the subject of our links and our websites, please visit the Sydney Rotary website, because that's been revamped around the beginning of the year. And if you haven't visited it, please do so. A lot of new content on there. Find out what members, the club, the projects we're working on, find out a lot more about those. And it is being updated on a regular basis, so please revisit it as well. Now, as we are limited in face-to-face interactions, we can easily lose touch with each other. And for new members, the opportunity to get to know other members can be somewhat limited. So hence we've introduced our member spotlight. And today the spotlight falls on Kathy Tate. We'll look forward to that a little later. Please be aware that, and I'll just do it now, microphones will be muted throughout the formal part of the meeting. But once the formal part's over, all participants will be able to unmute themselves and we can have a general chat at the end. I will now hand you over to our club president, Fatima Ali. Fatima, over to you.
Thank you, Glenn. First, let me start in the spirit of reconciliation. I would like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this meeting from the lands of the Wangal clan of the Eora Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all are today and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Fellow Rotarians and guests, welcome to our club meeting. I'm really delighted to see you here on this glorious spring day. I know you probably want to be out there. I can see the sun shining out there. It's beautiful. Special welcome to our guest speaker, Juliana Nkrumah. Later we will do a formal introduction, but for now, I just want to say welcome. As you know, I have been away and well for the last few weeks, and so I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude for your support and care during these difficult times. I wish to thank the board for their support for carrying the work in my absence. And also, I want to thank the 2 Vice Presidents, Charlie Allen and Kathy Tate, who stepped in the role so graciously and did a marvelous job. Kathy and Charlie, a big thank you. Now, I want to pass to Christopher Paris to present to us the thought of the day. To you, Chris.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. In recent times, there's been a message that's been echoing right across the country as thousands of people have come together to show solidarity with the Black Lives Matters movement in the US. Now, for a lot of people, these protests in the US drew attention to many issues that the Australian Indigenous people have faced for a very long time. After hearing many Indigenous leaders speak and spending some time to reflect on the topic, I think it is our duty to call out ignorance and call out racism. Do not be afraid to engage in conversations with loved ones, with your co-workers, with your friends. If you hear a racist joke or some form of prejudice, have the courage to stand against it. Remember that not saying anything or laughing along implies that you agree. With that in mind, I would like to leave you with a quote from the inspirational Martin Luther King Jr. The ultimate measure of a person is not where one stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where one stands in times of challenge and controversy. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.
Thank you, Chris. Now, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Juliana Nkrumah AM. Now, I've known Juliana for over 20 years, and she's achieved absolutely marvelous things in her career. But let me read you a few things about her, a brief biography. Juliana was awarded membership of the Order of Australia in the General Division in 2013 for her work with women in Australia. She is the Domestic and Family Violence Project Manager at Settlement Services International. For over 10 years, Juliana coordinated the New South Wales Police Force Multicultural Community Liaison Officer Program. She led New South Wales and Australia's work on female genital mutilation for 11 years and continued to maintain subject matter expertise on this cultural practice and its impact on communities in the diaspora. Her passion for centering the voices of African women in relevant discourses led her to found African Women Australia. She has served on boards to improve the status of women, including YWCA Australia, Australian National Committee on Refugee Women, Act for Peace, African Ministerial Committee, and the Eminent Australian Committee that reviewed the Australian citizenship test. Juliana has also been awarded the title Woman of the West and has received a Zest Award. Welcome, Juliana.
Thank you. Oh dear, I'm getting an echo. I hope it works for us. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join you. Please join me to thank Fatima for her introduction. I'd like to also acknowledge the land on which I'm coming from to you, the Darug and Guringai peoples, and I pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I concede that this land was never ceded. I would like to congratulate the Sydney Rotary Club on your 100th anniversary and applaud you for the true sign of maturity, your dive into diversity trail. At a 100-year mark, you have a chairperson in Fatima who is a woman of color, and I've ticked you for 2 points for congratulating you for bringing on a woman and a woman of color. I also congratulate and extend my congratulations to my good friend Fatima. She's told you we've known each other for over 20 years. It's like the friendship where you go away for 20 years and then when you get together, it's like you've never been away. And we've also shared colleagueship in the work we did on female genital mutilation. I assure you that Sydney Rotary Club is in a safe pair of hands. As a result of Fatima being the chair, you're going to be hearing from a lot of people of diversity, including me. So you got me for this afternoon. Now let's get serious here, shall we? You know, I am going to talk to you about a topic that is not very pleasant. I want to invite you into this journey with me as I agitate around Black Lives Matter in Australia. I plead your indulgence. In case of discomfort, remember to examine the source of that discomfort within yourself. My role here is to bring you the facts and present the experiences and the responses of the people that I work with and the people who are on the other side of the fence. I'm coming to you as a Black woman. I'm coming to you as a Ghanaian woman. I'm coming to you as a woman of Akan identity. I wear my Akan identity wherever I go with a lot of pride, and hence a piece of cloth, my kente cloth. And I do this because it makes me feel alive. I have a very good friend who is come onto this Zoom meeting to listen in, and she's a woman of indigenous Gomeroi background. And we share our symbols, and she tells me about how she carries a bit of sand from her land. And I carry little bits of artifacts from my people. We cannot forget them because we stand on their shoulders wherever we go. It will be a story of my journey and the voices of the people that I work with, and I support, and who support me. It will involve points of confrontation, but within that, I invite you to do as Muhammad Osman invites people to do, to listen, and then listen more. For in so doing, we all are propelled to effective and relevant action. I expect that at the end, we will commit to joining together to support and engage with the people who are down in the trenches working for justice. Why have I chosen to talk about Black Lives Matter? And why am I agitating around Black Lives Matter in Australia? Dare I say, Australia is a Black person's land. First shock. Don't worry, there's more to come. Given that this land is never ceded and continue to belong to the indigenous people who cared for it, for all of us to be able to come and exploit and benefit from, it is a Black person's land. So why agitate around Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter has been around as an activist movement since 2013. After George Zimmerman, a white man, was acquitted in the shooting of Trayvon Martin, a young, bright young man who was wearing his hoodie, walking home from his friend's house. His only crime was he was in the wrong place, in the wrong neighborhood. And so he had to die. I remember when my children came home and said, we're all going to be wearing hoodies. I didn't take it very serious. The young people did. And I didn't sort of understand their pain, but they carried it in their hearts. And the only way to show it was to start wearing hoodies. Black Lives Matter, according to Wikipedia, is a centralized political and social movement advocating for the non-violent civil disobedience in protests against incidents of police brutality, against racially motivated violence against people of Black color. The founders are three women, Alicia Gaza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi. And this was founded in 2013. We are in 2020. Black Lives Matter was bubbling along in the USA, and it took the public lynching of George Perry Floyd for us to, wake up, because it happened in public. It happened in broad daylight. It happened at the hands of 4 police officers who were tasked to protect people on the streets. It happened on May 25 in America, in Minneapolis, and the whole world went up in uproar. It was time. It was time for the world to pay attention. It was time for the world to acknowledge the demise of the Black person. George Floyd would have turned 47 tomorrow, the 14th of October. I am agitating. I am agitating because I was confronted and affronted and became very shocked in May 2020 when I suddenly realized that I was not even deemed a Black person in Australia. Me and my community from the continent who have come and have always been Black were not classified Black in Australia. It was like this. oh, but in Australia, the Black people are the indigenous Australians. So Black Lives Matter in Australia is about the issue of Black deaths in custody. Okay. From that shock came realization. My first realization being, yeah, right. What did I do when one of the founders of Black Lives Matter was in Australia in 2019? Did I pay attention? So the lesson for me then was, girl, stop sitting on the fence on certain issues and get involved. And that is one lesson that I bring to us. None of us can afford to sit on the fence on any issue for that matter. That was a lost opportunity, and I drew my lessons from there. After that rant, I hung on a minute, let's see what we can do. And then I went on to write a blog for YWCA Australia to support their position on Black Lives Matter. You can look at that on their website. I am agitating because young women and young men in my Ghanaian community in Sydney called me up. I don't know why they called me up. They could have called anybody up, but they called me up. And these were their words, Auntie, we are devastated. And I went, why? Why are you devastated? And then they said, not again, Auntie. And I said, not again about what? Well, they meant that their voices were not at the forefront as they expected it to be, because it was about Black Lives Matter. It was about us. So how is it that it's no longer about us? So what we did, thanks to COVID, we went on the Zoom meetings. After several Zoom meetings, we were able to calm the community down and support the young people in dealing with their feelings and support them in finding strategies that they would use, including strategies in going out there and learning about Indigenous people in Australia, what their situation has been, what you can do to support. Black Lives Matter protests have dwindled down across the world. Even in America, it's dwindled down. But the 4 police officers are out on bail, so they can afford that. The army is off the streets. We have all returned to our jobs, to our homes, to our lives. We have not reacted to the murders that have followed after the murder of George Floyd. And a few have happened to Black people in the USA since then. But institutional racism continues to mark the day-to-day lives of Black men and women around the world. As I prepared this material for this paper, I came across a story that pulled my heart apart. And I said to myself, if I was to show this story to the Sydney Rotary Club, I bet you the question that would come to me would be, what has it got to do with us in Australia? So I have taken part of the story for our sake at this afternoon's meeting. This is the part of the story that tore my heart. Anthony Ray Hinton, if anybody has paid attention, is a man who ended up on death row for 30 years of his life. All because on a bright morning, somebody decided that he was the one who had committed a crime. Not one, not two, but a number of crimes together. The words of the arresting officer, after asking him 51 times, what did I do, was, listen, there are 5 things against you. 1, you are Black. 2, your accuser is a white man. 3, the prosecutor will be a white man. 4, the judge will be a white man. 5, the whole jury will be a white jury. So that spells conviction, 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 conviction. And he was sent to death row for 30 years. Somebody will say to me, this will never happen in Australia. Thank God it will never happen in Australia. But will it? We don't know. Because we don't know all that happens everywhere in Australia, do we? And the media doesn't report everything, especially those things that are so incriminating. So, what has that got to do with us, Ms. Nkrumah? You may ask. We are the most successful multicultural country in the world. Wonderful. Of course we are. Don't get me wrong. I'm sitting here as your guest speaker, Anna. We have demonstrated diversity across everything we do, right? Good. No. It is about the underbelly of this most successful multicultural society. That's what we are on about. Believe me, my paper is not a white bashing paper. That's not my aim. It is about the opportunity to draw attention to what goes down with groups of people around us in case we cannot see and we cannot hear. It is a call to listen, and then listen more. My call is to look, and then look again. The successful multiculturalism is called for, we have no racism here. I'm calling you to look again, to look more, and to listen more. Don't all lives matter? Of course, all lives matter. But I believe that the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement needed a new phrase for structural systemic racism. Since the R word is no longer resonating, was no longer resonating in American society, and probably doesn't resonate here. It is even a word that is not languaged in Australia. We don't language it. It's like racism doesn't exist here. I want to talk to us about 4 groups of people this afternoon. It's 4. If you fall in that, great. If you don't, just listen. Young Black Africans, indigenous people, descendants of the Africans who came on the 1st, the 3rd, and the 8th fleet, and culturally diverse communities in Australia. So let's go. Through their voices, the young Black people, we hear pain. One young woman took to a blog, and I applaud her. Her name is Angelica. I work with her. She's the project manager in African Women Australia. She articulated her exhaustion. Our young people, the exhaustion that our young people feel, this sense of exhaustion was also articulated through the Zoom meetings we held. Our children have been called hateful racial names. They're called apes, gorillas, beasts, chimps. You think it's a joke? A woman called Maxine Benevi Clark, who was born in Australia to Caribbean parents, writes a book called The Racist Race. If you have time, read that book. And she's also a co-author and a co-editor of the book Growing Up African in Australia that was launched last year in the Sydney Writers Club. This woman talks about how she was spat upon in Melbourne when she was pushing her children to school. And Angelica talks about how she was spat upon on her way from school in Sydney and told to go and bleach her skin. We are seen outside the normal, stuck in the place that makes our emotions void and our skin vile. Assuming I cannot speak English, being followed in the shops, denied roles and opportunities. The accumulation of these incidents and microaggressions is mentally exhausting, Angelica says. To the indigenous community, about the indigenous community, we could write volumes and we could make a lot of poems, films and whatever. But in the words of Julie Tongs, it took the death of a Black woman in the USA to jolt Australians from customary inertia on the issue of Black deaths in custody. I agree with that, and I'm sure you do. Ray Stanwall calls Australia's rights original sin, in the words of Joe Biden, who talks about America's original sin. And he says it lies in the formation of Australia. The treatment of the First Nations people, stripped of the land connection, relegated to the margins, from which pleas for recognition have been repeatedly ignored. The original sin. Black Lives Matter stirred up something in Australia's psyche, and I'm glad for that, forcing us to confront our own original sin, not the important one. It is original sin in legitimizing violence that is not only used to steal the country and assert white dominance, but also to maintain it through the oppression of Aboriginal people, Amy Maguire. We all know the many, many stories, and we will get to know if we stop to listen. Listen, and then listen more. But for me, there is a blank. For me, as a Black African woman, a first-generation migrant whose children were born and raised up in Australia, there is a blank. My 3 children responded to the racism they experienced in different ways. My eldest left Australia. There's no way, whatever we've done, I've traveled to Ghana, where my homeland, sat with her, cried, and she said, no, ma'am, not coming back. And you all are parents, and you know how it feels when your firstborn child decides, it's enough, I will not stay there. Because she says, I cannot walk that land. So what she's feeling is right in her belly. The blank there, however, for me, is the question about what happened to the descendants of those 12 Black African men who came on the first fleet and other fleets. Where is their place in Australian history? That is the blank. Allow me to call out the name of some of them. Billy Blue was on the 3rd Fleet, the Commodore, the first ferryman of the Sydney Harbour, who our history tries to whiten. John Martin, John Randall. Hey, John, there's a John Randall online, isn't there? He's gone. Okay, I saw the name. So there's John Martin, John Randall. And if you go into the history, you'll find that the Martin Randall tribe had descendants in tens of thousands. Where are they? Where is their place in Australian society today? Black Caesar is the first Australian bushranger. Never you mind Ned Kelly. But we don't know. Most people don't know. John Williams, the Blackjack, was the Kangaroo Island sealer. And then there are others. The historian Pybus notes this. Because Australia is a racist society, and there was a concerted effort to wipe out non-European from Australia's history, they tell stories about Billy Blue, but they don't say that he was Black. That's not part of the story. I feel like singing, now praise we great and famous men, the fathers named in glory. But these fathers ain't named in glory. This is why I agitate around Black Lives Matter. Their lives mattered. The contribution to opening up the land in Australia, which we all proudly say is today is the most successful multicultural society, but isn't successful for all, is it? All lives matter. Black Lives Matter will be shouted from the rooftops. Let me draw your attention to complicity of the members of the General Code, culturally and linguistically diverse communities. How do the culturally and linguistically diverse communities participate in the original sin of the land? We all do. How many are happy to arrive and buy into the narratives about the Indigenous Australians and even dare to denigrate them without listening and listening more? How many of us enjoy the racism that escalates towards the people whose skin tone is darker than ours and enjoy the unarticulated caliber? Privileges to ones who are lighter skinned than ours. Are we all cowed, or are some more cowed than the other? Black Lives Matter. Let me end with a story. It is so painful when you read people writing things like this. I stand in solidarity with Indigenous communities and African Americans. Aboriginal people have solidarity and build our solidarities with both African American people, Native American people in the USA, as well as Aboriginal and Black people in Canada. Our stories are intertwined and united. Then you remember, not again. What do Black African migrants and refugees have? Don't they have dispossession in their history and racism in their current day lives in diaspora? I come from West Africa. I come from Ghana. The coastlines of Ghana are lined with castles, buildings that were huge monasteries now, castles where people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were shipped out of the continent into the new lands, into America, South America, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and other places in South America, and then to the UK, and then to the Caribbeans. Thousands, hundreds of thousands came out of my land. The town in which I went to school, Cape Coast, has a castle. Cape Coast, Elmina, and Osu Castle were the three castles that were used in the slave coast in Ghana. And so therefore, my history is one of dispossession. My history is one of dispossession. Great Britain did well, England did very well in coming to our land and making roads to resources, taking our timber, our gold, manganese, bauxite, the lot. And when we asked for independence, yes, we were given independence, but we were not supposed to be liberated. So my people continue to be colonized in our minds. The good thing we got was English language, because then we could be a nation, but our ethnicities were divided. It's not that dispossession. Is it because we are here as migrants, it doesn't make us dispossessed? I remember that after the refugees from South Sudan had landed, we heard the stories of police contact with African gangs in Victoria. They didn't exist before. Suddenly they existed. Then the gangs were migrating up north to Blacktown. And guess what some of us did? Went to Blacktown, looking for them. Did we? No. We went to ask the leaders, what's happening? What's going down? What can we do? How can we help? We needed another Black group to bash, to victimize and intimidate, didn't we? For years, Black Africans were outside the groups accepted for resettlement in Australia. On arrival, though, we demonized them to justify and reduce the refugee movement from the continent into Australia. Black lives matter and will continue to matter until the powers that be listen, listen, and listen more. Go beyond listening to take action. People like us who are able to access places of influence can only bring our messages as uncomfortable as they are, because things need to progress in Australia. Stan Grant has said, Australian people appear generally indifferent to historical introspection. I agree with that. I call for Australians to participate in nation building. The process requires introspection. The process requires practical historical introspection. Read, listen, act, get knowledge. My ancestors have something we say, if you go back to take from ancient days wisdom, it's not forbidden. So we say, Sankofa, go back and take from the past, because with that, you can move forward. And my friend Nicole and I wrote a paper for FECA conference last year where we said we're doing Makarata through Sankofa. And that's, I think, the process, to go to the back, to the past, collect wisdom, and then forge forward. Then become an ally, but not always an ally. The indigenous people are calling for people who will become accomplices. So let's all go together to learn as allies and then to move forward to be accomplices. Because this land will heal when Black Lives Matter. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Juliana. We'll go on to some questions and answers, if we may. Bridget has asked a question about the Black Lives Matter movement in Australia, and it hasn't really included Black African people. So the question is, what do we need to do to change that narrative in Australia?
Well, we need to change, first of all, I think we need to change the narrative to a narrative that says all Blacks. We don't need to begin to divide up the Black people. You Black, you Black. It doesn't matter whether you're indigenous or from Africa or from North America or from England or wherever else, the Caribbean or wherever, Black is Black. So when we stop dividing the Black people, then it will give an opportunity for the Black people to come together as a united whole. Then within and amongst ourselves, we will have our conversations. Currently, we have started having conversations with our young people and urging them how to begin to look for opportunities to engage and understand indigenous people. It is time for all of us Black people in the cult community to say, stop. Where have we come to? Who was here? Who are the elders? Who owns this land? What is their story? And when we go together to sit and share, we'll find how similar our stories are to each other. My friend Nicole and I do a lot of talking. And when we're writing our papers for our conference, we realized how similar we were, how we cried together for the things we shared around the stories of dispossession. So it's important for us to begin, for African and Black people to begin to say, let's find out who the indigenous people are. Let's throw away the narrative that we've come to and make the narrative work for us. Let's find out who they are, talk together, and then work together. So it's our responsibility. Nobody can do it for us. We should do it ourselves. And I believe that we are on the journey already to start doing that.
Thank you. Lena's asked a question which is related to that last one. You may have answered some of this already. There are similarities in issues between Black citizens and Indigenous Australians. How do we effectively work through that, help that, without compounding the specific issues that certain groups would have?
I believe that I've said already that each group has a responsibility by themselves. So the issue is not, it's not about waiting for government to do anything. It's about our communities themselves taking responsibility to go out and find out for themselves and work together. I have been confronted with allyship and accomplice and tokenism. Tokenism I've thrown out the door. Allyship, extremely important because I think it's the first step, it's the second step after knowledge, is the second step to understanding where the indigenous community sits and work with them. And as an accomplice, it's not my duty to say, I've got the English language, I've got the skills, I've got this, I've got that, I'll lead. No, it's not our place to lead. It's our place to fall behind. It's our place to say we work in solidarity. We cannot speak for the indigenous people. And then for us all to forge forward. And it's a responsibility that we all have, not only Black on Black, but all of us. But first of all, being who I am, I will take my people with me, you take your people with you. This journey has to take place in Australia.
Juliana, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time now for further questions. What I'd like to do now is hand over to Bridget, who will give a vote of thanks. Bridget.
Yeah, thank you. As you know, Juliana, we've had numerous conversations, and I'm just like blown away every single time I hear you speak, because everything that you've said really just resonates with me, especially the discussion about, you know, Black Lives Matter and how it played out in Australia, which both you and I were like, huh? So I think, you know, getting this information out is really, really important. I also liked how you, you know, spoke about the importance of engaging youth, because as you know, I sit on the youth committee, and kind of not just engaging, you know, Indigenous youth, but bringing those two, you know, populations or target groups together, I think is really important. And we need to do that. And hopefully Rotary in some way, form or fashion could, you know, facilitate that discussion. So that's something that we'd like to think about. So I thank you. And as a note of thanks, we are going to donate $100 to our centennial project called Give Every Child a Future. And that's, we're working in partnership with UNICEF across, you know, 3-year project aimed at vaccinating 100,000 children in 9 Pacific Islands countries, you know, against 3, you know, really heinous diseases. So that's just our way of, you know, giving to you, and then also that being a part of an initiative that's really important to us. So thank you so very much. And you're just a powerful sister. I appreciate that.
She is. She is. Thank you, Juliana.
Thank you. I will take my leave now. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juliana. Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay, so as we mentioned in the introduction, we're continuing the members' spotlight, and the spotlight today falls on Kathy Tate, one of our vice presidents, who will talk a little bit about herself, her background, why she joined, or when and why she joined Rotary, and perhaps touch on some of the most notable experiences so far. Kathy, over to you.
Holy cow, how do you follow something like that? Juliana was magical. Thank you, Bridget, by the way, for reinforcing that point. We've had discussions exactly about the topic Juliana focused on. Thanks, Chris, by the way, for the thought of the day. I'm going to keep this brief because a lot of you have heard a bit of my background. So from a family standpoint, married, I have 2 kids. One daughter is married to an Australian. They live in Brisbane. And we have an Aussie grandson whose name is Riley. And he's 14 months old and is the joy of our lives, but we aren't able to see him. We just found out that our son and daughter-in-law are expecting, and unfortunately, they'll be moving back to Canada for the birth of the baby. Just my brief background is professionally, I was 20 years as an executive with Xerox Canada. I'm 16 years as a certified management consultant, and the areas of specialty are the customer experience, organizational effectiveness, and executive coaching. And I thought, what would be of interest, just to give you a sense? People say, well, what does that mean? I still retain Canadian clients, which is being quite fortunate, but it means I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, which is ungodly hour. And I also do pro bono work here in Australia. One of the assignments we did as management consultants, there was a huge royal commission in Canada because we had deaths, 2 deaths that were experienced because of tainted meat. So what it came down to was the the meat inspectors themselves really had a challenge in communicating exactly what was going on in the various abattoirs. So myself and a colleague, Dr. Leo, and if you know Neil Simon, he looks exactly like him. We suited up in the white coats and the boots, and we had to go to 3 abattoirs that day. And needless to say, the inspectors thought that we were from the government, not independent consultants. And they managed to expose us to just about everything horrific you could imagine in the abattoir. We both said that we had to make sure that we didn't, excuse the term, vomit, and that we didn't faint with what we saw. But we had Vicks that we applied in our nostrils, so that helped. And we went back and we had to have, because we are meat eaters for the vegetarians in the group, we had meat that day to make sure we weren't turned off. The bottom line around that assignment was we ended up training 320 meat inspectors in Ontario. And that was pretty much against what the union wanted. We actually were facing a walkout until the union leaders came up and said this was one of the more valuable ever engagements that their meat inspectors had been treated to. Finally supported it, and the rest is history. Changes in process and protocols came out of that. So that's just a brief type of background around some of the assignments. I joined Rotary in 2017. 4 of our very best friends were Rotarians. They were so inspiring. We supported many, many of their events and causes. I was involved in boards with other not-for-profits. So it was a busy life back in Canada. But when I came here, my friend said, well, you have to join Rotary. I said, absolutely. I know no one. And needless to say, they actually did the research for me and said, Rotary Club of Sydney would be a good club for you to join. So here I am, peace building, centenary, and youth committees, and what I've been involved with. One of them you may see on a daily or weekly basis. And I really do invite you to visit our front door, which is our website. And the website was completely redone. And what it represents is really a lot of fresh, quality, deep content. I would encourage you to visit it. We have a lot of historical data. We have a lot of detail about the projects that your fellow Rotarians have been involved in and are spectacular projects. Something you need to be so proud of as this club. Like, remind yourself about the amazing things you have done, because it has been amazing. Going forward, you know, we have the youth committee led by Mark Dyer. We're going to be working on scholarships for rural and urban Indigenous, predominantly Indigenous, disadvantaged youth. We're going to be reinvigorating the Winter Appeal, which provides really functional items for wintertime for disadvantaged families and youth. And we're going to be hosting a Christmas party. And that Christmas party is going to take place at PCYC South Sydney. And I'm going to be pretty unabashedly asking you for help. And Glenn, if you could put a couple of our slides up on the screen. you know, these are the kids from the Christmas party 2 years ago. We do have a date. It's December 11th. It's a Friday. It's going to be 2:30 in the afternoon. We're going to be sending out a flyer for many of you to sign up for. We do need your help. We need a mini committee, 3 people only. We really could use you to dig into your pocketbooks. If you cannot donate a Christmas gift for the kids, we're asking for a monetary donation, not a lot, so that we can pay for food and gifts for the kids. And of course, we can't do this without you. Next slide, Glenn. Thank you. These are some of the kids you see, and on the next slide, you'll see some additional kids, maybe. If not, just keep in mind that we will be sending out a email. We really hope to see you on the day. It's going to be a COVID-safe outdoor day. These are some of the kids that we're going to be helping. For those that want to volunteer on the committee, 3 people only we need. We can really get this together, make it a memorable event for these kids and their families, and we can have a lot of fun. It's these kids are pretty joyous kids. As little as they have, oh my goodness, if you want to experience joy, come and join us on the day. And the last slide, Glenn. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to actually participate and to be, I guess, colleagues of yours in Rotary. And I've learned a lot. Certainly, I've made some great friends, and thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Kathy. And Fatima, for some closing remarks, over to you.
Yes, I really just want to reiterate what Kathy has said, that we welcome your support for the Christmas function at PCYC. PCYC is the work with PCYC is one of our key local projects. So there will be different components to it, as Kathy has mentioned. But I would like you to, think about how you can contribute locally to your community, individually as well, in different formats, whether monetary, whether time-wise, whether both. And this event will be one of our key events this year. So I really reiterate that. Please contact Kathy if you're interested. I hope you are in supporting this project. So thank you, Kathy and Glenn. So just in final remarks, it was a fascinating and engaging speaker today, and very challenging as well, and challenged me personally in many ways. Juliana, I've always been challenged by her whenever I hear her speaking. So thank you as well for listening to that and for taking on those ideas and thoughts. For next week's speaker, we have Christopher Baxland Walker, who is the General Manager Distribution at Clearview Wealth Limited, who will be talking about the future of financial services in Australia, particularly in the light of the recent financial crisis and so on, and COVID. So I invite you to attend next week's meeting. If you can put it on your agenda. And the last thing as well, I don't know, we'll probably have other committee meeting this week. Can anyone of the committee chairs make a note? Felina or Mark, do you have meetings this week at all?
No. Yes, we have a meeting tomorrow morning at 7:45 for the service and awards. Everybody's welcome. I don't usually copy the board members because they know the links and they have access, but everyone's invited in the club, anybody. So please come.
And I lost track of lunches and coffees and so on. Tony, do we have a lunch this week? Tony?
Whilst Tony's finding the mute button, I'll share that we are having our youth meeting tomorrow night, and we have the managers from both the Woolloomooloo and the South Sydney PCYC attending to give us an update on what's happening there. South Sydney's had a change of manager down there, so we'll get to meet her for the first time, and so that will be an interesting and informative meeting. If you don't have the details, then drop me a line and I'll send them to you. It's Zoom, of course.
Okay. And Tony, are you with us, Tony? I can't see Tony. Anyway.
Yes,
so,
I am. And
did you have lunch this week?
yeah, Glenn wouldn't let me unmute. So yes, there is a lunch on Friday at the Castlereagh Hotel. Everybody's welcome.
Okay, great. Well, with this, I conclude our formal part of the meeting. Thank you all for participating today, and please feel free to stay for our informal chats as usual. Thanks a lot.